Yeah,
Hey,
so
yeah,
oh,
good,
go,
Adam. Tell us about England.
yeah, so super exciting trip. Obviously went over there when I was a young kid with my mom. It was more like a sightseeing tour than it was, about footy. But I'd always wanted to go as a professional development experience, and also to kind of spread the word about American university soccer and all of its benefits. Not only from an educational standpoint, but an actual like pro pathway that's proven in our country. So I had the opportunity through some different contacts and connections that I made to meet with some very high level teams. Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal. Crystal Palace, Everton. I got tours of their training facilities. I ran into a couple of the pros that we see on Saturday morning all the time. I had to kind of keep my distance and not be a super fan and act a little bit coy,
Fan
but
killing. Yeah.
yeah, which was difficult to do. I got to adapt like Seamus Coleman and being a huge Everton fan. Like that was an unbelievable like moment for me. But I presented to the Watford U18 team because those guys know nothing really about university soccer. They think when they get cut after their U16 year or their 18 year that where do they go with life, in life? At this stage, and it's a huge void, and it's caused a lot of mental health issues there. There's a lot of depression. It's really sad, but there's been a few players that have taken their life. Specifically, there was a Manchester City boy that got released, I guess, at U17 level and took his own life from there. And I think for me, that was heartbreaking. So it wasn't only a motivation for me coming from Virginia, but just these young kids that just starting their lives and such great, talented footballers that can probably come here and change the talent level and team of a lot of our programs just coming from those pro environments, just not really fully knowing the value of what we offer here. So, like I said, I made some great connections. I think I got through to, the different teams that I got to meet with. I came home with a couple prospects, that got released from those teams that may be able to help UVA down the road potentially. And, it was a great experience overall. I was sad to leave, but I had to come back to being a husband and my full time job back here. So Dreamland was over.
Yeah. So that when you're presenting to Watford, like, what are some of the questions, or not just Watford, but any of the guys that you talk to? I mean, what are their questions? What are their kind of impressions of the college soccer scene and
Yeah, so I think it surprised me there because off the start of my presentation, I basically told these guys if they couldn't be a professional footballer, if the game of soccer kind of dropped off the world, crazy enough, what careers would they want to get into? And one of them talked about being a doctor. One of them talked about being in their version of like Wall Street, in London and like finance. And it was really great to hear their answers that they had thought a little bit broader about what they would want to do with their lives. Like I don't necessarily expect that being in a legitimate pro environment that Wofford creates. And I think they're curious to the lifestyle that our guys have, like the balance of academics. What kind of class are you taking? What majors are out there? What options are there? Of course, they're curious about the soccer element. I brought up a slide with not only Division One, but like kind of the levels of Division Two, Division Three, junior college, NAIA, and explained to them about all those university options. And naturally, they were curious about the level. I brought up a slide of the players in the Premier League right now, and/or the championship and where they've come from. A lot of Jack Harrison that came from Wake Forest, at Leeds, and Daryl DK was in the championship, came from UVA. A player was recently signed directly from Syracuse to Leicester City after this fall. So it was like not promising them that, hey, you come here, you're going to sign with a top level pro team, but that clearly there's a consistent pathway there. So I think it was a broad range of questions, a little bit like geographically, just understanding the United States, how big it is, like a little bit about these different areas and studying and, differences of going up to school in Boston as opposed to, Florida or California or Texas. But a curious bunch. And I think some of those kids have been sheltered in the sense that not a lot of them have had the opportunity to travel, even just for vacation, like to see the United States. So we seem like a bit of a world away, even though it's only about a 5 hour flight to get from here for England. So I was pleasantly surprised with their foundation of knowledge. I think it was probably more than maybe 10 or 15 years ago because some of their friends and teammates have gotten in with different companies, like Vertex or First Point or some of these different English organizations that take these kids that do get released and put them in a showcase to possibly come over here. But they're still, there's still this naivety in them that every single guy is going to sign a contract and be a pro. They don't realize that it's still a 0.001% of those guys that were sitting in that room that might actually have a chance. So I think just to, again, to show them this different idea and the horizons and the experience our guys have. And I showed a couple videos to create that excitement. And, like I said, I think it was good overall.
Cool. So today we have, you just heard, if you're not watching, Adam Perron, who is an assistant coach at the University of Virginia. Big time historical. How many national championships? It's like you look
7.
at the logo and there's like stars all the way across the crest. So up here in Charlottesville, Virginia, great program, contends for national championship every year. And then we got Cheese.
Logan,
who is the head coach at Christopher
national championships.
Zero. I mean, there are several national championships at Christopher Newport, but
correct,
not by you yet.
Not by men's soccer. No.
Yeah, maybe you and Adam can talk.
I watched them online though; they were fun games to watch.
It's coming soon, Cheese. I see it for you. See it for you in your future.
I hope so, buddy. Hope so.
It's a real honor to have you guys on. Obviously there's a lot to talk about. There's some huge differences in the way, Adam, you recruit on a international level. You've got guys, Cheese and I were talking beforehand, and there's a lot to ask you about how you sort through recruits. I'm sure you get bombarded each and every day with more emails than you can handle. So, Cheese, you want to kind of refine that question a little bit and from a coach's perspective?
Sure. Actually, before I have a question before we start that. What options do those kids in Europe have? I mean, in terms of college, these kids are talking about being doctors or working in Wall Street or their version of Wall Street. They have to get education, but are there not a lot of, what's the soccer college landscape, football landscape in Europe?
That's a great question. So very different than here. One of the famous institutions in England that can combine them a little bit is Loughborough University. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. When I used to be at Southern New Hampshire, we had a player that came from Loughborough, former pro academy player that got released, ended up attending their institution. And they had some sort of a league set up here, but it definitely doesn't have the infrastructure, the resources, the money invested in it as all of our college and universities have. It's not quite as serious. I don't think it's 5 days a week in terms of the training and the amount of games that we implement in it. It just doesn't seem, like I said, as serious as an intensive environment that we create here in America at all levels, because we all care and we're all competitive and trying to find the highest level of talent. So for the most part in Europe, not only in England, but even Germany and Norway, Sweden, Spain, these kids have an opportunity to either continue this pro pathway, because there are more opportunities to play 4th or 5th or 6th division in Germany or Spain or these different places, right? Just for much less money, but they have all these leagues that are structured that kids can continue to attempt to climb the ladder. But if they choose university, in essence, that means they're choosing what you talked about, trying to become a doctor, trying to become a lawyer, trying to get into business. And they have teams, but they're more like club teams. It's probably the best way that I can describe it. I didn't really get a feel if they have consistent full-time coaches. I don't think they do. Maybe they have some part-time guys that come in and run a session, but it's just a little bit more casual than it would be here, where, again, our seasons in the fall are a little bit more intense, and there's more development, there's more competition and whatnot behind it. So for those kids that want to truly pursue the intensity of both, and again, I think the awareness is building at all countries in Europe that this is an option. And I think countries like Portugal, probably Belgium, they're a little bit late to the game right now, partially because the language barrier is a big component to that. Also, there's not a lot of kids that have come over from those countries. Portugal's starting, but yeah, if you want to attend university there, it's pretty much university, and you're just fun in your soccer life at that stage.
Sure. No, that's huge. I mean, we don't get anything like you guys get in terms of the interest of the emails, but you see the kids that are reaching out through these different programs, these different agencies. And you're like, okay, most of these kids are really good players, and of course they can come over here, find a home right away. But you're talking scholarships at that point. But it kind of blows my mind that there isn't something for them other than these other lower division pro pathways, and a lot of those kids probably aren't interested in fifth or sixth division stuff. They're probably, man, I guess I'll just jump into this other stuff and not try to climb, those 5 rungs to get to the top again. I mean, that's definitely a big ask. But Scott, back to your original point. So Adam, you're also a state school in Virginia, just like Christopher Newport. We've talked about this a few times in previous podcasts, but our recruiting couldn't be, any more different. I mean, it's pretty wild. I used to see you all the time on the recruiting trail, and I hardly see you anymore, buddy. I mean, it's we hang out at all the games, and I see you from time to time. And it's not that you don't know the state of Virginia. It's not that you haven't done your homework. It's just that you have a much broader scale to go over. So if you don't mind, just kind of, in a vacuum, what does that look like? I mean, what is to recruit at a big time Division I program? You were also previously at Ohio State. I mean, 2, nationally known big programs. What is that recruiting like compared to a CNU or even a Division I that you were previously at with JMU? It's just a different animal. So, give us a little feedback on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the beginning part of that, I don't get it wrong in a sense that it's actually just because I've gotten married why you don't see me anymore. It's not anything to do with the change of programs or anything like that. It's just because my wife doesn't let me recruit anymore. But no, I think, here, especially at a place like Virginia, right? You have your roster roughly around like 30 kids, and on every given season, you're allowed you only bring in a certain amount of players. So maybe it's between somewhere 7 to 10 players on any given class. And then within that 7 or 10, now with this landscape of this transfer portal that has come about in the last, it's always kind of been there, but it's just been really relevant in the last few years when they've taken away a lot of the rules to transfer. So it's like a free for all.
Right.
Now you can find, and we were talking about this in the office yesterday, you can find a seasoned, more polished, proven, older player that you can get that's basically been in another program for 2 years, and you could see that track record rather than taking a chance on an unproven 17-year-old. So that's always a dynamic that you weigh, is like you've always looked at kids and their talent at the youth level and tried to almost guess, or at least, figure out the pathway that they could become on. What are they going to become? What's their potential look like? What's their talent? Like, try to guess through their character and their psyche, their work ethic. And you have all this process that you go through. So now you combine taking in a few of those kids every recruiting class, but still leaving open, enough space to bring on some of these transfers from these other programs, be it international or American kids that want a bigger challenge or move from a big program to big program. So that landscape certainly changed in the last probably 12 to 15 months. But I think how we start the process, right, is just like anyone else, it's just determining need. I have like spreadsheets and data on, what our class looks like now coming in, like for this coming like 2023, 24 is almost done. We're probably halfway through already. But there's certain positional needs that we'll have, I know, in 2025, like through graduation. But at a program like Virginia, you could lose a guy at any time. This could be summer before they come for their first year. There could be first fall after they've played here to the pros. We lost Jackson Hopkins for DC United. We thought he was all set, slated. He had his deposit paid. And then I think it was April of the spring before he was supposed to arrive here, DC decided then to sign him homegrown. So you always have to have like contingency plans in place, and you kind of have to plan out, and have a good strategy into what you want to bring in and make sure that you're covering each of those roles. So I think these big showcases, right, that everyone attends, these MLS events, and right now I think you can tell that those are, in theory, the best of the best. I think the scouting networks at all these MLS teams have improved. I know I'm hired for DC United as a part-time scout because of the amount that I'm on the road, but all of these teams have constant scouting for all of the non-MLS academy teams. So in theory, all of these clubs are bringing on the best ECNL or CCL or these new leagues that are coming out, and they're bringing them into home stays and residency. So we could typically get our best bang for our buck watching these playoffs, watching GA Cup. We were at the MLS Next event in Maryland, so you could truly see kind of the best in there. And then, I'll be at the ECNL event in Richmond, at least for a day, to continue to look for the diamonds in the rough. The Virginia kids from Beach FC, from Arlington. I'll look at NCFC kids. I'll maybe look at some of the other teams that are doing well throughout the country, because some of those kids may not have access to an MLS team, may want to stay with their high school team, may want to continue on the path they're on. They like the coach they're on, like the challenge that ECNL team presents. Like, for whatever reason, you could still find some very, very good players at some of these non-academy programs. So we have our spreadsheets, we have our organization. I think our ID camps are still a huge draw and a huge source for us. I know, Justin, you've been to some of these camps and you've seen the level that we put together in these camps. For my boss, who's been doing it for 30 years, that's his favorite way of truly identifying who's a fit for our program, because he can get a more comprehensive look at the players we bring in, because we can put them in training environments. We can change and tweak the training environment to try to see that player's strengths and weaknesses. We can see how they come into an uncomfortable environment and how they can still perform and assert themselves and show their confidence in proving that they're one of the best in that environment. And then, of course, we can do our additional research going to their games in their home, like club teams. So it's definitely a daunting task. And then having to align the academic side and make sure that they're good enough students that, we can support them through the admissions process, and that when they come here, they'll have the aptitude to make it. Because, again, UVA is not a school that you get into and then it's just easy from there. There's certainly a rigor and the expectations that the teachers have. So, certainly that speaks to kind of their character and their mindset and their ambition in general. And I'm sure we can get more into like what we look for in individual players at some point in the podcast. But, I definitely try to scour the country, and we do get inundated with guys across the globe. And, one of my contacts just called me as we're on the podcast here, so I had to shut that call off. But you're always getting, players introduced to you because of the reputation that has come before us and everything George has done with the program. We typically get to see every contact's best players because they want them playing in the ACC. It's the biggest challenge. It's the best conference. It's, turning the most pros consistently. So it's certainly wading through all the players and the talent and finding the ones that are best equipped to handle chasing a championship and trying to become a professional.
It's interesting. You just mentioned a few things there that tying them together, really, it opens a lot of eyes. So you said you're bringing around 7 to 10, depending on the class, but just Virginia kids, Mid-Atlantic of the Eastern Seaboard, international, national, you add up all of those emails or contacts or however they're reaching out. What like 7 to 10 out of roughly how many? I mean, we're about 7 to 10 as well out of a few thousand emails and contacts. What type of contact list do you think, if you were to say every kid that's emailed me, I put them in a list? I mean, how long is that list?
On average, because also I had a little secret. I took over the head coach's email on the website. So any of the kids that only would email him, they come directly to me now because it would just be too big of a volume for him to handle and what he has to do. He's big
Right.
picture on everything, right? So I come in roughly every morning, not counting showcases, to about 50 emails, I'd say. And around showcase times, I'd say it goes up. So about 75 or 80 emails. So you add that all up over the course of a year, not to mention like private texts or calls that I get from like contacts, I would say it's probably roughly like 4,000 to 5,000 overall. And that's actually a big reason here, not a sales pitch for the camps, but a lot of them, I actually try to answer as many as I can, like as humanly possible. Sometimes it might be a generic email, but there's some authenticity when I say, come to these ID camps, because all of our coaches coach ID camps. We often bring in other college coaches. And if you are good enough for what we're looking for, you are going to stand out in that environment between that 75 to 100 kids that we have, because it's just physically impossible to see every single kid that emails us. But I know out of that 5,000 emails, there are kids in there that can change your program, that have pro potential, that, they'll go to a competitor if you're not doing your due diligence and looking at them. It's just not humanly possible without watching 5 minutes at each game on these fields and going to every field to see everyone. So try to do as much as I can, though.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, ID camps they're critical for all of our programs. And I love attending yours, by the way. You got when the podcast is over, you got to let me know when you have some going on this summer. So either myself or True Blood can get our butts over there. But, your ID camp is a UVA ID camp. It's not one of these other ones that has, 10, 15 schools. Like, we've done one of those, and we have a specific CNU William & Mary ID camp since we're, so close. And I've been to yours, and I sat next to who was it? Middlebury? Is that right?
Yeah,
Middlebury? Which
yeah,
one of your
Millbury assistant.
yeah. And I mean, of course, the level's fantastic, but what does the ID camp tell you when a kid is attending it? It really it tells you that they're super interested in your school. They're going to take the extra step. It's not just a simple I'm going to email this guy. You also emailed 100 people. I mean, that I am so interested in UVA, or I'm so interested in Christopher Newport, that I'm going to attend their camp. I'm going to go and pay for the ID camp and attend. And how many kids are flying in from Europe or across the country? And I remember the one kid from Morocco you had. I mean, you've had some players from all over the world, and they are telling you a story. I am super interested. Please spend some time on me. And what better way than when you're in my backyard, and I can get my entire staff's eyes on you for a few hours at a time. And I, do you want to speak on that a little bit? I mean, how many guys on your roster played in your ID camp?
I mean, I could speak to the last two classes. I know this will be my fourth year here, so actually our roster's adding up to that, but at least half.
Yeah.
At least half of our current recruiting class in 2023 have been there. Out of 2024, as I think in my mind, 3 of the 4 commitments have been at the camp. So to your point, I do think that shows a lot of investment on their end. I mean, some of these kids might come to the camp, they might blow it out of the water, and they might get a full scholarship. Again, I'm not promising that to any listener that that's going to happen, but that does show on the front end. One, you're betting on yourself. I'm betting on myself to come into this environment, be brave in front of 100 kids in this environment with all the coaches watching me, that I can stand out, because that pales in comparison to Friday night 4,000 fans on ESPN and national television in the Sweet 16, the NCAA tournament, and the pressures you organically feel just wanting to do well there. So can you be what we call like a primetime player when you go into that setting and stand out? But yeah, like you talked about, I mean, just the investment coming in, the parents flying in, I think it gives a kid a great feeling on their end as well. Like, some people are getting out there with some of this news and on Twitter and social media, like all these camps are just a money grab, right? Which of course is an element that, you charge a fee, and it's mandated by the NCAA that we do that. And you could pay some assistant coaches. Like, everyone has to make a living in anything else. But I think families can truly also get a feel for how you do things. They interact with you on a more intimate level. If I'm on the field running a training session, you get to see how I coach. You get to see the standards that I put forth, the detail in which I coach. Because when I get to run with my group, that's also, as an assistant coach, my opportunity to be a head coach in a way. So I run that just the same as if I was hired tomorrow at a Division I program. I try to give them the same energy, details, enthusiasm that I would for our players. They get to meet the head coach, see how he is. So you might leave and see the area of Charlottesville and our facilities. You might leave and say, man, that tall ball guy was crazy. I don't want to play there. I guess I'd like to think that rarely happens, but you may leave and you may love everything even more. And now you get that phone call from us, and now you have context about how we do things, what we expect, the fields that we play on, the Charlottesville area. I love the shopping. I love the food. My parents loved it. It's not too far from home. I get a true feeling for everything as close as I can legally from NCAA standpoint, aside from maybe an official visit. But as you've been to some of our camps, we have some of our players knocking around too. So maybe 1 or 2 of our guys can jump in a training session. You get to feel what it is for a player that, heck, might be in the MLS someday or in USL or playing at the next level. But you get to see what a Virginia player is and his talents and his athleticism, and compare yourself to that, which I think is invaluable. Partly for awareness too, guys. Like, I think when camps get a little bit sneaky or sketchy in a sense is when parents keep sending their kids to 50 Division I camps and not understanding that maybe my child isn't a Division I player, boy or girl. You could send to a few camps early in the process, and if you're getting some interest and some feedback from that, and you could tangibly feel like, okay, I am one of the better players here, like this is the level I should be looking, you could start to guide your search where, okay, it might not be Virginia, Wake, Georgetown. Now I'm going to look to the next tier. Next tier doesn't really work out. I got a call from a great school, Christopher Newport. They're a national championship contending team. There's still some Division I talent that ends up there for their reasons. And I'm going to go and really enjoy my experience, play for a good team, make sure I'm playing on the field and everything else that comes with it. So I think these camps can be utilized for a lot of different things. Like, I'm very passionate about them for sure, as you can probably tell in my voice.
No, I love your guys' camps. Last time I was at UVA before I started coming to your camps, I was a little kid. I think I went to a UVA game. I didn't understand what was going on. I wasn't even looking to be going to a school or anything. So I just saw it as a soccer field, go watch the game. But once I pulled up, to your place, and you could tell, like, all right, like this is UVA athletics. I mean, you drive by your basketball stadium. I think the last time I went was right after the boys won the national title, and it's just a neat thing. It's where they play all their home games. It's a different environment. It was kind of neat, and you said a lot of good things there about ID camps, and I couldn't agree with you more. Not only are we checking to see if you're a fit for us, but you have to be doing your homework on us as well. I mean,
Definitely.
especially you guys, if you're good enough to play at UVA, you're going to have to play at a lot of places. And so you should be in there saying, like, all right, Coach Perron, I liked him. He's a cool guy. I got to interact with Coach George. And, you have to see, like, am I going to enjoy spending 4 years at this place on this field with these gentlemen? Is this going to be what I want? And not just look into, cool, UVA offered me, I get to throw that on the Instagram or whatever. I mean, you have to look way past that, see it as getting the most for you. You mentioned the money. We have to charge for these things. It's a rule. And getting the most for your buck. You mentioned some great stuff, checking out the area, making sure you can see yourself spending 4 years on this campus. And, the ultimate question is, can you see yourself here for 4 years, whether I step foot on the field or not? Because you just never know. You just never know what's going to happen. Nothing's guaranteed. That's the ultimate question. It's the whole reason for this podcast, right? And, so I thought you said a lot of great things. I do want to, if you don't mind, Scott, I want to jump into a little bit of your previous experiences. Give us a little bit of rundown on where you were. You're from the New England area, if I remember correctly, and you coached up there a bunch, a couple different levels. And, from the people I've talked to, I don't go up there very often in terms of recruiting. I would love to. There's a lot of talent, but it seems like that even that animal is different just up there, regardless of level. You're in the private schools much more, which around here we aren't in the private schools really at all, any schooling, and it's just a different animal. If you don't mind kind of touching up on that a little bit and comparing it to what we've been discussing, between our two programs.
Yeah, no, it's take it back a little bit. Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts, in Western Massachusetts, just outside of Springfield, and spent a lot of time up there. I went to a private school myself, so that's where I started to kind of gain some familiarity with it. I moved to a school called Wilbraham in Munson in 8th grade. So I was a small town, like public school kid at the time. I was having trouble learning a little bit. I was sitting in the back of the class, these big classrooms. So, my mom kind of put the kibosh on the direction I was heading in that regard quick and got me into kind of these smaller classrooms, a little bit more intimate, a little bit more attention. There's more support available. There's certainly an investment. My school was, I think at the time, like $25,000 or $30,000 a year. It was a shirt and tie and a sport jacket, every single day. And I guess that was good, I think, early on, because it introduced a little bit of discipline, a little bit of consistency and accountability, in my youth, which I think was helpful. There's like some mandates there about the activities and sports you're getting into. So I think it makes sure that you don't, and not that I was like a problem kid or getting into trouble, but it makes sure that when you're finished with school at 3 o'clock that, you're either, like for me, I was in 3 sports. I was in soccer, basketball, and tennis. So, I think there's a lot of private schools up there that, you might have to do an activity, right? So you're in like the newspaper, but you start, having responsibility, and then having to marry, again, like, you have study halls, a lot of these places as well. So it's ensuring that, you're going to class, you're getting, you're doing your sport, you're going to practice or your game. And then in the evenings, you have the study hall for 2 hours to make sure you're keeping up with your grades. So it's instilling like good habits in kids. And every prep school up there and private school has different little nuances and differences in how they do things. But for the most part, I think it does set you on a good path and put you in good habits, going into college. But yeah, I grew up in Western Mass. I played Division III at Colby Sawyer. I was a little bit under recruited. I didn't really know much about the recruiting process. They didn't have ID camps, to the best of my knowledge, when I was young. So, again, a lot of my own recruiting strategy and how I've formed that has come from my process and making sure I'm not missing on good young players that may not know much about the process in general. But went to that Division III, had a wonderful experience. Not just saying that, like that's why I'm always very passionate about any kid. Like UVA is not for everyone. Like I know I wasn't good enough to play at UVA when I was younger. Maybe as I got older and got to the minor leagues, I started getting to a level where I could have been interesting. But I think my experience at Division III, just shaped my love for the game, and I enjoyed the fact that I was able to step in and compete for a job right away and play. And then I guess moving on from that, got out of college. I was playing professionally for a little bit, and then I kind of stumbled into this coaching element, if you will. 25 years old, a friend of mine took a job at Utica College, and he offered me to be a grad assistant. I hadn't thought much about doing a master's degree, but I got about a $10,000 stipend, and my master's paid for to be his assistant coach. And actually, I toiled around a couple careers along with my professional, trying to be a pro, like playing career. Couldn't really find what was for me, like out of school. And then when I got to this coaching, I was like, bang, like this is exactly what I'm looking for. Like I could be around the sport I love. I can help young players pursue their dreams. I can compete and kind of channel this competitive drive that I have through this sport. Like this is fantastic. So that first year when we were there, the team wasn't in a great spot. I come off a losing season. And there was like a couple of weeks that Joe Calabrese was the head coach. He's the head coach at Endicott College now. He's a good friend of mine. He said, Perron, I don't want you to be around the games or the team right now. It's nothing to do with you. I need you on the road recruiting. I need you to find me better players. So literally for 2 weeks straight, I didn't go to any of the games that they played. I didn't go to one practice. He just sent me, and we were in New York. It was Central New York in Utica College. So I went from New York to Western Mass to Connecticut to Boston to New Hampshire to Maine. Like it was like a crash course in recruiting. I'd never really done it before. I just went to high school games, club games, just figured out these different environments and what it was all about. And then I pounded the phones. I had a little bit of a sales background prior to getting into this. So it was easy for me to kind of talk on the phone and articulate myself and build relationships. But that first like 2 weeks, this was like halfway through the season. That was, a big kind of eye opener for me in recruiting. And I think part of your question is kind of what the landscape is up there. I think soccer is pretty big in a lot of those little areas, like different parts of New York, one in the city, upstate New York, oddly enough, in like Lewiston, Maine, Boston, Fall River, Springfield, Worcester, like you go across these different cities and similar to the dynamics we have here, maybe Richmond or parts of Virginia Beach or Roanoke, there's these like refugee communities, right? Of families that have come over and like immigrated here to our country and their kids. There are some extremely talented and athletic boys that are in these different areas that I've talked about. And of course you get your good academies. Like when I was at Utica, the academy system, development academy is kind of just starting. I mean, this was like crazy to say, like 14 years ago now. So it was just kind of forming, and it's really honed now as the MLS has really grabbed hold of it all. And kind of changed over that time. But now as ECNL has grown, like I said, as MLS has grown, these different leagues have come about. Like there are some really good talented players throughout all those states in New England and the Northeast. And like I was talking about, it's only augmented by some of these talents that some of these refugees have. Some of those kids end up in private school. These private schools you touched on grab kids from Europe. So there's young Spaniards, Chileans, Ghanaians, Liberians, Senegalese kids that are littered throughout these places. So you can definitely go up to that area and find some really interesting players. And those schools have financial aid and technically like scholarships as well. So you can find a Ghanaian guy that has played at Berkshire Academy in Western Mass that is good enough to come to a Virginia or Georgetown or Wake Forest. As a matter of fact, if you watch, consistently college soccer, and even these kids are littering into like Amherst College and Tufts and some of these different high academic Division threes, like NESCAC schools, maybe because for whatever reason they weren't quite, full scholarship prospect at the Division I level, and a lot of these kids may need that financial support. But these Division III programs have that model where they'll support a kid to their financial need and be able to get them into those programs. So I wouldn't say it has the depth of talent in the Northeast that, say, the Mid-Atlantic, the south of Florida, Texas, California, like those areas have. But there are a lot of good players in the Northeast region, for sure. And I'm always, especially because I'm from there, Boston College probably isn't too happy with me. But the prospect we have coming in 2024 will be our third New England Revolution player coming down to Virginia. So it's definitely home for me. And it's still, whenever I get up there, I try to go to some different events. And there's a colleague that I have named Mike Soboff. He runs this Center of Excellence, he calls it. It's like an elite training school. It's like a homestay. He has like housing for these kids. It's like a year-round like training program. He plays games, takes his team overseas. Not a plug for that, but he's starting to take all like the really talented players, hone their game in extreme detail, and he's turning out more prospects as well. So it's definitely an area that I try to make sure that, along with Virginia, as we talked about earlier, that I really know that Northeast landscape and who's coming up through.
Sure. You touched on something a little bit there with what schools can offer, and I'm definitely not trying to help Amherst or Tufts. They've done pretty well on their own,
Yeah.
but it's true. There are a lot of schools, and they're a private school, high academic, big endowment. They've got some history from their grad school, from their the graduates from those places, and they can offer certain things though. Just to tie it into this recruiting podcast. I'm not trying to help other schools, but those schools can get kids that the only other people that can get them are people like you that can offer full athletic scholarships. And they've got these different programs, and we've harped on this quite a bit through the previous episodes. These kids have to do their homework if they really like a school, or if they're really into a certain type of academic situation. They have to look for these schools that offer different programs. And I mean, there are kids that we played against at the Division III level who are going to these amazing $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year school for like $2-3 grand a year. And it's because you at UVA can only offer the kid a half a scholarship, and a half a scholarship Division I kid is going to do great at Division III, but he's going to a school on borderline a full ride to play Division III because of his academic prowess or because of what that school can offer. So, once again, I'm not trying to help my competitors here, but these kids, most of them don't do that type of homework that we're talking about. Most of them are, specifically speaking, we're Virginia people. They're just looking at, I'm looking at UVA, I'm looking at Tech, I'm looking at William and Mary. I'll throw in a couple of D3s, Mary Wash, CNU, and we'll go from there. And they just totally left out some fantastic high academic private schools that might have a much, much better program for each kid. We mentioned the New England area. Our buddy Mike Singleton at WNL had an amazing soccer player. I think it was a 2 or 3 time All-American.
Yeah.
One of those New England private schools. And I know that he was going there on a big scholarship because he fit the criteria. He was an excellent student, excellent kid. I hated playing against him. He was a fantastic player, and but he found the perfect home. It was a perfect fit for him, and he's from right there. That's why I wanted to kind of target those areas and just see what your thoughts were on what those kids can do and where they can go.
Yeah, he actually called us about him. If that's the boy, I think it's Kutsanera or whatever it was, but we got a video on him, and he was intriguing. We had him up on our big screen in the office, and I think we wanted someone a little bit different for what we're looking for at the final spot. But I think there's a couple of Division I's that reached out to me because they knew that we were looking at them, and I told Mike because Mike's a friend, and like I said, anytime I can help a young boy,
100%.
Get to Division I and realize his dreams. I know he's probably coming from Africa, so he probably has had a little bit more of a difficult life than a lot of us. And so I've tried to give a reference whenever someone has reached out. But there are a lot of players scattered around Division III, as you well know, that can come to our level and do a great job. And maybe their skill set refined a little bit later than others. So maybe they were, passed over in the recruiting process for whatever reason. Yeah. But again, for them, they got into a great environment. They played, they had good coaching. They were passionate, I'm sure, and they worked hard. And, then they transformed themselves into a player, like you said, that's just a pain in the rear to play against because of their talent, their perseverance, and all these other qualities. But we were looking at another prep boy from Tennessee that I think, to your point, is going to end up at Hampden-Sydney. Because not a lot of people knew about him. He wasn't quite, wasn't quite good enough for a complete full scholarship from us. We were intrigued, with him, but I think Tommy's going to end up taking him there. And he was just telling me, "How does this guy not get picked up by Division I?" I'm like, I couldn't tell you, man. Maybe exposure. Again, it's a big country, and that part of Tennessee, it's not necessarily the most farmed in terms of talent, but you have some of these diamonds in the rough that end up making it to a very high level for sure.
And that kid needed a big scholarship. He's looking for some financial help. And so there's a perfect example. Hampden-Sydney, you go ahead and look online right now. Their sticker price is going to, how's this kid that doesn't have any money going to be able to afford this place? But Tommy and those guys may have an awesome program that make perfect sense for the kid, and he fits in there, and he's going to get that type of scholarship where he's not even coming close to paying full price there. And, that's a perfect example. I'd love to pick Tommy's brain on that. And if he's that good, I'm going to see if we can't create some program for him here at CNU real quick.
Yeah. I'll send you his number when I do what I can to help. But I think that's always another pathway without spending too much time on. I don't know if this was going to lead to a question, but need-based financial aid is always another very viable option to help families support the process. I think every family comes into our dynamic, and they're always like, well, what can you give me for scholarship? What's my son worth? Like all these different things, right? In different terms, different words, but we only have the 9.9 scholarships to work with. But some of our best players that you can watch in our teams, and even from the national championship teams, those guys are here on financial aid or full
Mhm.
financial aid or some version of it. Like maybe they're getting 20,000, 30,000 in grant money. So it's money the families don't have to pay back. So we can build deep championship teams with that financial aid because we don't have academic scholarships, because every student that comes here are really good students. They have a few you have to apply for, but in George's 30 years, he said he's never had a soccer player get an academic award or scholarship on the way in. So we're always just transparent. Now, there's other schools that have just academic but no need based, and obviously depending on the levels. And of course, that goes into every family search when it comes to like paying for university. Because believe me, the sticker price of UVA is 73,000 out of state. In state, it's roughly about 33, I think, right now. So again, if I could find a top talent in Virginia, of course, I'm going to try to do that because I think it makes it a little bit more feasible and affordable on both ends. Our end to package that kid and also the family's end to find that player. But if you're looking for something specific and we don't quite have that player in state, well, now you have to go to some of these different options and hopefully, be able to make it as affordable as you can for the family while also being fair to your team
Yeah.
and what they deserve. Because an unproven player is just that, where at least in our system here, it's always a meritocracy specific to Virginia in the sense that players that perform at a high level, if they came in on no money, no athletic support, no promise of it, and if they become a starter, if we have these different criteria, then we reward them for that success. So I think that's always something we try to get out to families on the front end. But that should always be a part of family search: is what do schools have for academic money, athletic money, financial aid, need based, because I think that could always make the school more affordable than just, like I said, I'm just going to decide because of soccer, I'm going to wear the jacket to play at this school, but it's going to put me in debt for the rest of my life. Because
Sure.
you know what I mean? So that's always a huge criterion in these processes as well.
Well, you mentioned the 9.9 scholarships. My guess, if you were to add up your 9.9 scholarships plus the scholarships these kids are getting on their own, which I'm imagining that your part of your job is to find kids that, oh, wow, this kid's a full ride for us, but he's going to get 75% of that full ride from these other avenues. So he's only going to cost me a quarter. And that kid is so much more appealing to you than having to get a full ride and dumping it into somebody else. And if you were to add up all the scholarships that your kids have been able to find on their own, in addition to 9.9, I mean, I'd imagine most of your kids are on some kind of money, whether it's coming from you or not. I mean, realistically, what would you say? I mean, how many of your guys are scholarshiped up, or what percentage of it are scholarships?
Yeah, great question. So actually, I was just looking at our spreadsheet the other day, so without giving too much for any other college coaches that listen. And
Sure.
I think we have like 16 players that are on some form of athletic aid. So that's not counting the financial aid. Now, of course, there's some guys on full, some guys on percentages. It differs, but I think we've stretched that pretty well. But then if you add in financial aid, I'd say you probably have 20, at least 20 or more that are on some form of financial aid, be it from the university or from us. And I think, like, going into this 2023 class, we have one player that has full financial aid because of the economic situation he's in. Single mom, she works a couple of jobs, tough area, from up north. There's a boy coming in 2024. I won't get too much into his story, but he's had a really difficult upbringing. Parents have been in a difficult situation. He's kind of like has a guardian, these type of situations. He's got full support from UVA and full financial aid. Now, both those kids are very talented, but you love to have those guys because, and partially for the player, like the pressure's not on them as much. Like when you give someone a lot of athletic aid, there is a huge expectation that comes along with that player's performance. And if that player doesn't perform well, it's innate that, I mean, our guys talk, like they know what each other's on. They start maybe looking at each other funny. And of course, from the head coach down, like if you have a full ride that's sitting on the bench or someone over 50%, I'd say, because anything over 50 is significant. You're in trouble if you've missed on a few of those guys as it comes to your on-field product based on our competition, like in our league. So when you get a kid that is on like this need-based financial aid, and it doesn't matter in terms of playing time or anything. There's kids that start that are on no money. There's kids that play tremendously, that are pros, that are on this financial aid. So sometimes parents worry like, oh, if they're not on athletic aid, does it mean that they're going to be looked at differently? And the answer is sheer and utter no.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's about who's the best guy, who can help us win, who can help us play at a high level. So I think that's important to try to make as many good decisions as possible. And yeah, to your point, Cheese, like when we can find a guy that fits everything we're looking for, academics, athletics, and then, of course, if they get financial aid and it makes it affordable for their family, then it's definitely a home run in our recruiting classes for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine if you only had kids on your roster that were in the 9.9 and everybody else was full pay, your roster would look significantly different. I mean, you guys, you have to help with them. You have to kind of say, hey, look into this, look at this program. And this is part of our questioning when we talk to these kids in the front end. We're hearing their story, we're hearing their situation, and we're like, boom, I need to encourage this, I need to encourage that. Maybe they could look into this field or this program that our school offers, and then that's going to help you out of that 9.9 scholarship process as well. And yeah, I mean, what if you were just, I have 9.9, I have 9 full rides, and one guy on 90%, and then everybody else is paying that full price. And geez, if you're an out-of-state kid, that's a high sticker price. I mean, your roster would look significantly different, and I'm sure it's going to affect the level and everything. And just to take this back and give it back to the families that are going to be watching this, you have to make sure you do your homework. Look into these programs, ask the coaches, especially at your level where you have to focus on those money things. Yeah, we're going to know the answer to that. You have to ask us, what do you guys have? What programs do you recommend we look into so that we can, subsidize this heavy cost and this heavy burden for the next 4 years? And it's amazing. I'm glad to hear that there's that many kids that are getting a big bump to attend UVA. That's a great thing to hear.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, like I said, I've only been doing this at this level in Division One now. I think this will be my fourth, so 6 years counting JMU. Like, in order to win at a high clip with the grueling college season that it is, and especially in this conference in ACC, because every Friday is a war. And I say that humbly, like when you walk into matches against Clemson, Duke, Wake, etc., and then you go on a Tuesday and you're getting every single out-of-conference team's best effort on a Tuesday night. Like, you need depth. You need depth. You're going to absorb injuries. You're going to absorb cards. There's going to be a suspension. Or, it's just it's an aggressive physical game. So some programs, I feel it's a gift to have these options here. When I talk to some of my colleagues in the game, there's always banter and jokes about all big time in UVA and financial aid and whatnot, but it is extremely helpful to stretch your teams, because if you lose your right back for the season to an injury, you can build in someone that comes on and the level doesn't drop. He might not quite be at the standard of that, option one, but option two is going to be a darn good player with some talent and readiness and be able to step in. And now it's not killing your aspiration and ambition. I've played against teams that there might be one or two in our conference that choose to just give full rides to your whole starting 11, right? Or 0.8 or more. So, and they're great if you maintain health and you want to go with a rotation of 12 or 13, but you lose one of those two players and you can sense a tangible drop off. If those two are some of your better ones, if you don't have that depth covered and built in to help. I mean, if you go to the Final Four or finals, that's 24 games you're playing in a 2.5 or 3 month span.
Right.
That's a lot of football that you're playing in that time. So yeah, I'm always grateful for what we have, and I'll happily absorb the jokes that I get for being able to compensate some of these players in this way. But I think in order to win consistently, that's what you need, is to constantly have contingency plans and build depth and, reward players for good performances, and hopefully being able to use that athletic money that opens up for those rewards for the guys that have done it for you and proved at Virginia that they can do it at a high level.
Jeez, keep going, man. Just enjoying hearing you guys chop it up.
I get a bit long-winded sometimes, so I hope if you guys need to cut me off at all, But I love speaking with you guys. I'm so glad that you've had me on here to talk about some of these topics. I always do as many webinars or podcasts or different recruiting talks that people allow me to do, because to the best I can, I try to, I hear a lot of conversations with families that they're sending a first-time, young boy or young girl through the college process. And it can be daunting if you have no idea what to do. And that was me, like, years and years ago. My mom helped drove a lot of it, and God bless her, like she tried her best to align kind of some interests that, I might have with a major and all these things. Like, there's so many different elements to it. And there's more and more information coming out with these podcasts and YouTube and companies. So it's very helpful. But, I think I try to do the best I can, right, through these avenues to just educate families and talk to them about, give them a more invasive look about what we're thinking, Because I think a lot of people that haven't coached in college, and again, some of the people I follow on Twitter or these consultancy firms, they think they know what we're thinking, but they don't. And it's no offense to them. And I think, certainly they get some things right and they do well. And I talk with a lot of consultants that want to tell me kind of what I need to look at or how to do my job or all these things, right? I'm always respectful for everything they're doing. But unless they've been in it, like Cheese and I, or like Brendan or Chris Norris and these different programs, like they don't really know what we're looking for or why we're looking forward. Or, hey, your son might be a great right back, but we just don't need a right back. Or, hey, your son might be great, but we've used all of our support through admissions. We just can't get him in. We can't. It's not that he's a bad player. He's not, this or that, but this just isn't a marriage right now because of these dynamics. So there's so many little things that you're working with. And, I just try to help young players not get discouraged, through the process. It should be exciting. It should be, dictated by what you want in essence, while also, again, like what these schools are looking for. But it's amazing how much information's out there that could be construed in the wrong way because some of these individuals don't necessarily know exactly what guys like Cheese and I are truly after or looking for or whatnot. There can be some assumptions that can steer families in the wrong way,
And that's the whole reason why we started this, is because there's so much information out there, but nobody's getting it from guys like you, who do this day in and day out. My personal experience. I mean, my son. I mean, if I didn't have guys like Cheese and Norris and you, whoever I interacted with, I mean, I can't imagine going through this without some sort of insight. It's completely overwhelming, and you don't know where to start. You don't know what the right answers are. So, again, that's why we started this, is to kind of be a resource for people who are starting and then going through the process. So, I mean, I can't thank you guys enough for the insight that you guys have provided through the years and on this podcast as well. So, go ahead, Cheese. I cut you off.
No, it's just piggybacking what Adam was saying. I mean, it's true. I mean, we just talked about Scott and I before the podcast started. A buddy of ours said he watched it, and he's in the game, but he's not a college coach. He did a little bit, but he goes, I knew most of what you guys said. It just kind of, it seemed like he's like, oh yeah, I've got it. And I kind of chuckled. I'm like, okay, I'm sure you understood a lot of that, but you're feeding that information to all these kids that you're working with. And I've talked to a lot of directors that, I'm not trying to insult anybody here, but it seems like they've all like, oh, I've got it. I played in college and I've sent kids to the school. And I mean, to your point, Adam, that we've talked about, how different is the landscape today than it was just 3-4 years ago. And if you're not in the college recruiting landscape, it's going to change. It's going to leave you behind. And, like I love Steve Shaw. He's recruited some amazing players here at CNU, but he's now been out of this for 4 years. And when I explained some of the stuff that we are doing, he's like, we never had to do that. The transfer portal, I'm not even sure he knows how to log in to check. And some of my best players have come from that. And it's a dynamic that's changing all the time. We have to adapt, even get ahead of it if we can in certain things. Maybe, it's starting to change. The tides are changing, jump way ahead so we can be the first ones, across the big field to get those kids that are sitting there. And you have to continue to watch these things. You have to continue to talk and interact with these coaches. You mentioned the ID camps. What better way to pick a coach's mind than when you're sitting there at an ID camp and he's sitting right next to you, and maybe he pulled you off for the 11-a-side scrimmages. Like, whoa, go talk to the coach, pick his brain, and you're going to get information that you would never find. I love these directors to death, but they have to ask us these questions anyways. They have to figure out what we're looking for. They're digging as well. And the ones that are really doing a good job, they have to pry. They have to figure out, what's it look like now? Hey, Adam, what's it like at UVA for this season? What are you looking for? And, geez, Norris, what do you think now? What's it look like? And because it is different every year, it's changing a little bit. And you go 3-4 years without really doing a deep dive into what it looks like, you're way behind. And that's the whole point of this podcast. And I had one director say to me that I'm too honest to the kids one time, and I still to this day don't understand what that meant. I just don't. I didn't know honesty was a gray thing. I thought it was black and white. But I'm hoping that this podcast is showing that, is showing the black and white that this is exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's the strategy that I've taken, just in my life, is being honest with myself, but being honest with families, being honest with my boss and staff and everything else. And I think there's always a way to come across with a message that you can be respectful but honest, right, without completely tearing apart a kid's dreams. And that's in our over 13 or 14 years I've tried to hone, especially as the levels increase that I've been able to coach at, because there's a lot of people, as I touched on before, that want to be at UVA. So you break a lot of hearts over my time here. Nothing for nothing to families. Like, my heart gets broken too. So it's always reciprocated. Like, we have offers out to a couple kids right now that are top players, and I'm going up against some high level programs in the Pac-12 or the ACC or the Big East or what have you. And those kids might reject me, but I don't think like rejection is the end of the world. It just tells you need to maybe keep looking and go and refine a little bit. And, like you were just talking about, like, when we all played, it was years ago. Like, I graduated college in 2006. So if any of these directors played in 2006, man, soccer as a game in our country has changed since then. Tactics have evolved since then. Like, it is so much different. And like I mentioned before, this portal has changed everything. It's really changed everything. Some programs, like in our league, I know, Syracuse and among some others, I don't want to speak like about them, and this isn't negative at all, but they've chosen to take on a lot of transfers as their kind of model, because again, the proven aspect to what they do, and they just won a national championship, with that kind of model. So is it that there might be a few less opportunities for a young player in a program off the start, where maybe that program or that kid has to go into a, mid-major Division I? And I'll never educate a family on, hey, go into this program with the idea to transfer. Like, that's not what I'm about either. I think when you go into somewhere, you want to be there, you play with pride, you love that place, you give everything that you have. But there's certainly a circumstance that if you feel like you're not being challenged and that you're kind of jumping your talent scale, if you will, and your upward track, then you want to go from a mid-major conference to the ACC, like, that's out there available to you now. Or if you redshirt for a year in one of those years and you want to do a grad somewhere at the highest level, we have 3 grad students coming in, one from Dartmouth, one from George Washington, one from Cal Berkeley, that they're taking a grad program, but for the most part, they want to take their shot at becoming a pro. For whatever reason, their teams didn't have great seasons. They didn't get in the shop window. They want to come in and challenge themselves against the best of the best, both in our environment and the opposition that we have. So, to tie that in, like, that's just what we're going with now. And like you said, you're using the transfer portal. So maybe a kid starts at Division I and he's like, holy cow, I don't really want to do this. This isn't quite the life I want, or I'm not playing, or it's harder than I thought. Like, let me go to this program where I could still, again, compete at a high level, but I want to play. I want to be on the field. I want to have meaning behind my experience. And to some, meaning is feeling, control in a sense over results and being a part of it. For some guys, it's not just enough to be here and on a bench, right? Where we don't really recruit players to be bench players. We want guys that'll grow and develop and be on the field. So both orders, I think guys are transferring up and transferring down, which sometimes affects, like we talked about, the incoming element and taking a guy in their first year. So yeah, the dynamic is always evolving. And I think the smartest people and the smartest directors have conversations with us in more of a way that's like, how is it changing? And a little bit more inquisitive, so they can kind of better project honesty on their kids and better educate them on these changes as they're coming up through, the youth.
Yeah, and a lot of them will bring us in. I love that. Bring us in to talk to the players directly, and that
Definitely.
allows them the Q&A part of that's usually the best part, where you just let these parents. Some of them have really asked some questions. You're like, all right, cool. I'm gonna tell you some stuff because of the question that you just asked, and yeah, it's critical. I've gone to a bunch of ID camps where they'll have the whole coaches. We're all sitting there and we're all talking a little bit, and it's interesting to see how some respond, how some talk, and I think the fact finding is critical here. I mean, not just it's your 4 years, it's your money. I mean, how many kids are getting scholarships? It's most kids that are going to be watching this they're going to have to pay for school, and they have to make sure you're getting exactly what you want out of it. You don't want to be in the transfer portal. I know that we're talking about how we're spending a lot of time on it, but most kids, we tell you, it's like, do you want to go to a school with the thought of, cool, I'm going to go here so I can leave? That's not the goal, right? You want to go and find a 4-year home, and some kids are using it for a great benefit. You talked about grad school options. Some kids are like, well, I'm finished at this place. It's time for me to go somewhere else. Yeah, but the portal, between the portal and the basic recruiting, there are so many good kids. And diving in the portal again, there's a lot of Division I kids that I'll write, and no other Division Ones are even writing them. And that's how big the portal is becoming. Where, I mean, was there 4,000 kids in it right now, or close
Yeah,
to it? It's like,
it's a
where are they
record
going
among
to
all
go?
the sports.
Right. And it's like, where are they going to go? There's not enough schools. And I mean, it's also May. You know, like where can these kids go now? And some of these are great kids from great programs that had a lot of options coming out of high school. And now they're kind of stuck with, great, what am I going to do now? And it's, you know, to your point earlier, it breaks my heart telling a kid no. I hate it. I hate telling a kid that loves the school that I also really like. I'm sorry, we don't have room for you. I hate telling my own players, hey, sorry, you're not traveling for this big, you
Yeah,
know, AA tournament game. I hate
yeah,
that. It breaks my heart. And it also breaks my heart to see a kid in the portal that you saw in the recruiting process, and you're like, man, he's got to be unhappy right now, and that's not a good thing. You don't want that. And you always wonder, could that kid have done more on the front end? Could that kid have done more studying, or more research, or more deep dive into what he really wants and what his family can do before he made the decision that he made? And you know, I'm hopeful, Scott, that this thing is going to push more kids into that world where they're going to the right spots day one and not having to go through this process multiple times.
Why we're doing it.
yeah. And if I can add one more thing to that point, like, and I'm sure this is a piece of what you guys are starting with this organization, because it's all about like mentality. And I think they always have these different percentages, and it sounds cliche, but I feel like the modern player, not everyone, right? So this is a generalization, but they're like afraid of a process. They're afraid of adversity, and they're
Mm,
not as like resilient in that way where they meet adversity in different versions, right? So a guy that might be here, to your point, Cheese, he might not be traveling in his first year, or he might be on the bench. He's traveling, but he's on the bench, hasn't played a minute. He's coming from a elite MLS academy or elite club where he was the man. Like he
right.
had a season, one of our recruits coming in, he has 15 goals, 13 assists this year in the year for his academy team. But he might come in and there's a chance he might not travel. Like we don't know. He has to kind of prove himself. Like, so do you experience that first block, that first roadblock, and start to wilt and start to make excuses and start to have negative chatter with your teammates and look for the guys that you can complain with and not look in the mirror? And you know what I'm reading one of David Goggins' books, he calls it the accountability mirror. If he can copyright that. But look in the mirror and come up with an action plan and say, what am I not doing? What am I missing? What are those players in my position ahead of me doing that I'm not? Is it a stamina work rate thing? Do I need to get fitter, stronger? Do I need to improve my first touch? Like whatever the quality is, at the end of the day, if a kid is open to that feedback and then truly willing to go into the lab, as we call it, and improve their game. Now it might come after a week. You can't all of a sudden in 1 week's time of staying after training expect you to kind of overcome every limitation you've had for 17 years of your soccer career or whatever it might be. Like it takes some time. But if you truly graft every day, even for 15 minutes a day over a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, off season, like what are you doing? Like I feel like you're going to find change. You're going to find growth there as long as you're open to doing that. So for any one of our guys that come in, we can always give them, to the point we talked about, like honesty in what we feel. And especially if it comes from all four of us coaches, we can't all be crazy because, some kids say, oh, the coaches don't know. I'm not defending enough. Like we had a kid that we said didn't defend enough. That's the reason he wasn't playing. He ended up transferring, and now he's at that program, and that head coach is complaining about the fact he doesn't want to defend. So it's not just us. Like we're not trying to hurt anyone by being honest. We're trying to make these guys better. It's not saying, hey, kid, you're a jerk. That's why you're not playing. It's, hey, these are the tangible things that is why you're not on there and getting what you want, which is playing time. So how are you going in to fix that? And I think you can spin that on the recruiting sense. Like you might not get your option 1, 2, or 3. But again, what are you doing to continue to grow and get better and then still maintaining belief in yourself, which is hard to do, but you have to. Like all of our opinions are subjective. Cheese might love a player that I don't maybe think is that good, and it's okay. Like that's his opinion. And I think every single college coach is going to differ in how they view players based on how they view the game. And I may view the game differently than Cheese, than Scott, than the head coach here, and that's okay, like out there. But I think for these kids to maintain some level of personal belief, I think it's for families to help their kids become resilient. I don't have kids, so I can't, give them a 1, 2, 3 step process. I mean, you guys are parents, so you guys could probably help me when I have a child, but don't just let your child just run it in the face of adversity and quit something right away, which i.e. might be transferring off the first sign of struggle. but let them like work through that, let them grow through that, let them be challenged. And as long as they feel truly that they're getting a fair shot in that program, because some coaches are political or biased, and it does happen. So maybe if you don't feel like you're getting a fair shake, but look at the whys, and then from that process your decision making, and just kind of, I like to say, man up, or get after it, and like, then change your disposition, change your picture, change your product. And the guys here that have been willing to do that from a psychological mentality standpoint, they've gone on to do such great things. And I see those guys as the ones being successful in sport or in life. It's the ones that make excuses, point fingers, that wilt away, that start turning negative. They're the ones that don't amount to quite as much as those guys that have that tougher mentality. But I think that mentality can be worked on as well.
Oh yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Agreed.
All right. Let's be respectful of everyone's time. Hi, Adam. I'm sure you got other stuff to do today. You guys have a showcase this weekend, yeah?
We do. We're working on a transfer too right now, so I'm going through all the backroom tape and compliance and admissions and all these different things right now. But I've really enjoyed being on here, guys, and I put it out to you. I know you have a lot of different guests and everything that you do. If you ever had a Q&A, as your company gets, more years along and established and everything else, and you have parents that fire off 15 questions, and we get on here and we talk about those questions specific. If there's anything I can do to help out some old friends here and like I said, build awareness about the process and help, please don't hesitate. I love getting on with you guys as often as you'll have me.
Absolutely. You'll definitely be on again. That's for sure.
Love that.
All right.
Glenn Chezem have won a national championship. Let's go. Maybe us too.
Hey man, next time, the t-shirts.